Are you interested in lowering your A1C? In this video, I'm going to be providing you with some basic tips I use to normalize my blood sugars. Hi, my name is Jillian. I've been living with type 1 diabetes for 32 years. I'm a stay-at-home mom with 2 young children. This is my diabetes lifestyle channel. In this channel, you'll gain access to a lot of information about type 1 diabetes and also get a glance at how I balance my life living with a chronic illness and raising a young family. First off, what do I mean by normalizing blood sugars? What is a normal blood sugar? Is it the 80 to 180 range that the ADA recommends? No. I'm talking about a blood sugar that a normal non-diabetic would have, and that is 83. So 83 is the ultimate goal, in my opinion. You don't always want to start off with a target of 83. If you've been running higher for quite some time, you're going to want to shoot for a lower target. That might be 100, that might be 120 for you. It's really about taking baby steps to getting to that 83. I didn't start out with that. My range is different. I usually like to be anywhere from 70, above 70, all the way up to 120 is when I start to give correction doses. So most doctors are not fans of my 83 target blood sugar. They think I'm gonna have more lows, but to be real with you, I have less. If I were to try to keep my blood sugar higher, I might spike higher after my meals, and then I would be doing more correction doses and it'd be more insulin on board and a risk of lower blood sugars. Too much insulin causes low blood sugars in type 1 diabetics. The closer I can stay to 83, the less low blood sugars I have and the less high blood sugars. With my diabetes management, I haven't always been under the best control, so I think the closer I can stay to 83 at this point on, even better. It's gonna put me in better range than most people. I've had a lot of doctors tell me, wow, your A1C is better than mine. Yeah, it probably is. I mean, I do have more of those fluctuations, so I have to be really careful when I can. So that's why I shoot for 83, and Bernstein recommends it. So if you're really serious about diabetes management, I want you to have that as an end goal, 83. But please do not start out there if you've been running high for a significant amount of time. It does take a lot of work. I'm not trying to make it sound like it is easy. You have to structure your life around it, but it is possible. So I want you to know that. Tip number 1, I follow a low carb lifestyle. I highly recommend you do the same. I don't see how it would be possible to keep your blood sugar in that range if you're eating a high carb diet. And by high carb, I mean what the ADA recommends, and anything above that, it's hard, especially taking the rapid acting insulin. It's just hard for those peaks to match. And I mean the peak of the insulin matching up with the peak of your blood sugar rise from the carbs. So there are many different types of low carb diets. There's just low carb where it's 100 grams or less. There's keto where it's 20 grams or less. I don't really focus on the amount of carbs. I try to stick to 30 or less. That's what Dr. Bernstein recommends. I do eat glucose to raise my blood sugars. So if I have a low blood sugar, I'm not going to be at the 30 carbs per day. I'm going to be at 35 or 40, depending on how low I went and how many times I went low that day. So I am on a low carb, high protein diet. That's the difference between keto and what I do. With keto, you have to limit your protein as well as your carbs and up your fat. So I don't consume a bunch of extra fat. I just don't limit it. But I do make sure I hit a certain amount of protein every day. I work out, so I want to make sure I build the muscle. Protein is very important for muscle recovery and just normal body functions. I will touch on the Bernstein diet in another video. I don't want to go in depth with it too much right now. Just know I do eat a low carb diet. Minimal snacking, that is an important tip. I do not snack between meals often. If I'm out and about or at a party and they have some hors d'oeuvres, I might snack on a couple pieces of cheese or nuts, things I know are not going to affect my blood sugar very much. And that's if my blood sugar is on the lower end of my range. I don't intentionally just add a snack because I think I'm going to be hungry. I eat enough at each meal to fill me up and hold me over to the next meal. I don't eat breakfast, to be honest with you. I like to work out early in the morning, so if I have insulin on board to cover my breakfast, that will drop my blood sugar during my workouts, and it's just not pretty. So I tend to skip breakfast in the morning pretty often, especially on my workout days. So I eat lunch between 11 and 12 on most days, and my dinner is ready on the table by 5 p.m. We eat dinner early. I find the earlier I can eat and finish dinner, the less chance of my blood sugar rising overnight. It's another thing, if you eat before bed, you are going to run into issues, whether it be from taking insulin too close to your bedtime or just the spike in the food going up. Your blood sugar tends to trend up over time if you eat past a certain hour. Taking correction doses at night can be a big mistake too, because your insulin has a longer tail at night because you don't have any food on board. You shouldn't if you stop eating after dinner, which is what I do. It's kind of like an intermittent fasting schedule. It's not really to lose weight, but it is to manage my diabetes. So I recommend that to you if you're interested in it. If you can't handle skipping breakfast, go for it. Your diabetes might be different than mine. You might be able to manage it better and handle that insulin on board throughout your morning routine. I'm also a lot more insulin resistant in the morning, so I need more insulin to cover the carbs I'm eating or the protein I'm eating. So I usually don't have any meals or any snacks after 6 p.m. I'm done with dinner normally. So here's the exception to that rule for me. On Mondays, I have a later workout. I have a Pilates class I have joined, and I start that at 5:45 and it goes till about 7 p.m. So I have to come home after that and eat because I do not eat before Pilates. I skip my normal dinner routine and I eat when I get home, which is usually 7:15 or so. I have something ready, but I do make sure it is something quick that I can just eat really quick, and it's not going to be something that I need a really long extended bolus for, because that will give me issues later in the night. So I try to take something where I need all the insulin up front and it hits me faster. It might be a higher carb meal for me, or something like whey protein where it's a liquid protein source where it's gonna affect my blood sugars faster, so I can just take some rapid acting and be good. So like I mentioned before, I'm really careful about doing correction doses at night. If I do have a high blood sugar or I see my blood sugar start to rise, like I said, Mondays I eat a little bit later, so it does tend to give me a little rise, and sometimes I need that correction dose. On Mondays I work out twice a day, so I'm more insulin sensitive. So I usually cut my correction dose by half, and I do okay. Or sometimes that's one of the instances where I do turn on the Control IQ on my tandem pump to help with a drop from the correction dose that late and a potential spike in my blood sugar later from eating later at night. Another important tip I have for you is treat your low blood sugars with glucose and glucose only. I carry around my Walmart brand glucose gummies everywhere. I have 5 bottles around my house. I have one in the diaper bag, one in the car, one in my purse. They're everywhere. So I'm always taking glucose to treat my blood sugars for the most part. I know there's 4 grams in one gummy, so I know how much exactly that will raise my blood sugar, or should, a pretty good range. For the most part, you can get that figured out rather than a bite of cupcake. Like, do you know how many carbs are in a bite of cupcake? Not normally. Like, all cupcakes are different. That's troublesome, especially with something that's high carb, high fat, because that is going to take longer to raise your blood sugar. So you're gonna be lower for a longer amount of time. You're like, why am I still low? My blood sugar's not going up. Then you're going to continue to consume more of it, and you're gonna get a later spike. And it's gonna continue to rise with that high fat, because fat delays the glucose spike. They used to always teach diabetics to drink orange juice when they have a low blood sugar. Are you measuring out your juice? Probably not. Gummies you don't have to measure, it's 1 unit. Same with glucose tabs. They're not as good, they're chalky and disgusting and I don't like them, so I prefer the gummies. But there's also liquid sources of glucose. Glucose is just going to hit you faster than anything else. There's no fiber in it. There's nothing slowing it down to delay that rise in blood sugar that you need when you are low. So I recommend using glucose all the time for low blood sugars. I understand you might have a bite of something, but really it should just be to make that exception to the rule and enjoy a bite. It shouldn't be what you're treating the low blood sugar with, especially if you're really low. If you're maybe 70 to 80 and you feel like you're starting to drop, that might be a better situation where you have that treat and enjoy it. Please enjoy it. Another tip I have for you is to not only dose for carb intake, but protein intake. So you're gonna dose for your full amount of carbohydrates consumed, as well as 50% of protein. It's 50 to 60%. I've been doing 50% lately and have great luck with it. Protein takes a little longer to hit your system, so on top of that, you're also going to want to use an extended bolus if you're using a pump. If you are doing MDI or multiple daily injections, you can just use R and it will account for your protein intake. I am on the tandem pump, so I have the benefit of being able to use the extended bolus. So for most moderate fat, high protein, low carb meals, I would do an extended bolus for 2 hours, and I'd normally take 60% of the insulin up front, and it gives you the option to do that, and then 40% would be administered throughout the next 2 hours. If I were to eat something that was maybe higher in protein or a lot more higher in fat, such as a ribeye steak, a fatty cut of meat, I would extend that bolus for 4 hours. So the tandem's great. I believe you can go all the way up to 6 hours using the tandem t:slim X2. I'm not sure about other pumps. I think the Omnipod gives you the option for 2 hours, but they do not allow extended bolus on their automated system. Tandem does with the Control IQ, which is amazing. But they do limit it to 2 hours using the extended bolus. So if you are not using a pump, Dr. Bernstein recommends you use R insulin. You can get this over the counter at Walmart for about $20, $25, I believe, and it will work for those later protein spikes just like an extended bolus would. Honestly, it's probably better than the extended bolus with a pump, but my life is just a lot simpler using a pump. So with the target of 83 as a blood glucose, I correct anything over 120. Now that is used as long as I don't have any insulin on board or I didn't just finish a meal. You definitely want to be careful about stacking insulin. So do not take your insulin and then check your blood sugar an hour after eating. If you're at 120, take more insulin. Please do not do that. That's going to stack insulin and it is a recipe for disaster later. You could end up going into hypoglycemia and have a low blood sugar. That's something you want to avoid at all costs. Also, if your target range is not 83 yet, if you are trying to get an average blood sugar of 120, if that's your target blood glucose, please don't just correct everything over 120. Maybe bump that number up to 150 and above and do corrections with that. Still going by the same guidelines about avoiding the insulin stacking. All right, so those were most of my tips about how to achieve a normal blood sugar of 83 most of the time. I'm probably missing a few. I will be coming out with many more videos later, so you will get lots of more information about this topic. I do have 7 other videos up right now. These were all batch created and published at the same time. So please check them all out. There's many other topics, Dexcom site changes, pump site changes. I did a comparison about the Tandem t:slim X2 versus the Omnipod 5 pump. I hope you find this content useful. Please leave me any questions down below in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.